Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into a really uncomfortable question.
A very uncomfortable one.
We're looking at why, with all this elite attention, all this philanthropic money being thrown at the world's biggest problems, things like inequality just seem to be getting worse, not better.
And for this, we are going deep into Anand Giridharadas' book, Winners Take All, The Elite Charade of Changing the World. Our mission today is, well, it's pretty focused.
It has to be.
We want to unpack the structural blind spots, the moral contradictions that are kind of baked into this whole world of modern elite benevolence.
The core idea, the thesis from the book, is that the winners of our current very unequal system have sort of co-opted the idea of social change.
Right. They've reshaped it in their own image in a way that maybe not even on purpose preserves the very system that made them winners in the first place.
And this isn't just some academic exercise. This is urgent, and it matters to you, our listener, because the whole American progress machine seems to be broken.
It's completely broken. That engine that was supposed to create prosperity for everyone, it's sputtering. We're surrounded by innovation, by what the source calls the clank, clank, clank of the new. But for most people, progress has just stalled.
And that's the central paradox, isn't it? The
Yeah.
disconnect between invention and distribution.
Exactly. I mean, think about this. America's scientists, they're the world leaders in biomedical research. We publish more studies. We hold more patents for life-saving tech than anyone.
Okay, so we're inventing the cures.
We are. And yet, the average American's health is improving slower than in almost any other rich country. And in some recent years, life expectancy in the United States has actually gone down.
Wow. So the innovation is there, but the actual health outcomes aren't following.
They're not. The access, the systemic health of the population, it's just not there.
And you see the same pattern in education, right?
For sure. I mean, look at all the amazing new learning tools we have. MOOCs, Khan Academy, free coding tutorials. It's all online, accessible to anyone with an internet connection.
A democratization of knowledge, supposedly.
Supposedly. But despite all that, the average 12th grader today tests worse in reading than they did back in 1992.
Worse. Not just the same, but worse.
Worse. The tools are there, they're free, but the system itself is failing the students.
So if the tech is supposed to be this great equalizer, creating all this opportunity, you'd expect to see a boom in entrepreneurship.
You'd think so. But the share of young people starting their own businesses has fallen by 2/3 since the 1980s.
2/3. And this is in an age where you can theoretically start a business with a laptop, you can learn to code for free, you can sign up to drive for Uber.
Right. The tools are more accessible than ever, but the actual foundation for taking that risk, things like capital, a stable income, a social safety net, that's what's missing for so many.
So it all paints a pretty clear picture. The system is creating these incredible gains, but they're not being shared. They're flowing in one direction.
Straight to the top. And we need to look at the numbers here because they set the stage for this whole phenomenon of elites becoming our saviors.
Okay, let's get into the economic data.
It really boils down to this. Since 1980, so for the last 40 plus years, the average pre-tax income for the bottom half of all Americans has stayed exactly the same.
Wait, say that again.
It has not changed. Over 117 million people have seen zero material benefit from 4 decades of globalization, technological revolution, and economic growth.
Zero. That number is...
Girl.
It's just staggering, especially when you compare it to what's happened at the top.
And that's the other side of the coin. Over that exact same period, income for the top 1% has more than tripled.
Tripled.
And if you go even higher to the top 0.0001%, their income has risen more than 7 times over.
So you have this chasm opening up. It must have a huge effect on something like social mobility, the American dream.
It creates what the author calls a split-screen reality. If you were born around 1984 and you grew up near the top of the income ladder, you had about a 70% chance of earning more than your parents. The system worked for you.
That sounds like the promise we were all sold.
Right. But if you were born near the bottom, where you need that mobility the most, you only had a 35% chance of climbing higher than your parents. The ladder is basically gone for half the country.
And this kind of deep structural unfairness. This has to be what's fueling all the resentment, the populism, the anger we see all around the world. People feel it. They know the game is rigged.
They absolutely do. And this brings us right to the solution that the elites have proposed. This is the charade.
The charade of changing the world.
Exactly. Because this incredibly influential view started to take hold, which is that the winners of this unjust system, the people with the money, the connections, the mindset that helped them win, are the only ones who can possibly fix it.
They become our saviors.
They become our saviors. And in that moment, politics and government get pushed to the side, and philanthropy and business thinking take center stage. This is the rise of what the book calls MarketWorld.
Okay, let's unpack MarketWorld. Because it's not a place like Davos. It's an ideology. It's a whole culture.
It's a complete culture. MarketWorld is defined as this ecosystem where social change is pursued through the free market, through voluntary action, through big dollar charity.
And pointedly, not through government.
Deliberately not through government. It bypasses the slow, messy, conflict-ridden world of democracy and lawmaking because its core belief is that what's best for the powerful is, by definition, best for the powerless too.
The win-win.
The perpetual win-win.
Yeah.
It says that elite-led, market-friendly solutions are always better because they're scalable, they're efficient, and most importantly, they don't threaten the existing power structure.
And we can see this cultural shift happening in real time if we look at someone like Hillary Cohen, a Georgetown grad mentioned in the book.
Yeah.
She wanted to do good, but the language of doing good had completely changed.
It had. Her generation, they weren't talking about systems of oppression or political movements in the same way. The campus culture had shifted. The old socialism clubs were gone, replaced by social enterprise clubs.
So it became about business ventures.
Everything became a business venture. The conversation wasn't about challenging the powers that be. It was about how to build a social enterprise and achieve impact at scale. The very idea of changing the world got funneled into building things, not tearing unjust things down.
And this mindset, I imagine, made them perfect recruiting targets for places like Goldman Sachs or McKinsey.
Oh, absolutely. These corporate giants became masters at this. They pitched themselves not just as jobs, but as essential springboards, as laboratories for changing the world.
How did they do that?
Well, Goldman Sachs would heavily promote things like its 10,000 Women initiative or these really complex social impact bonds. The pitch was, come here first. Learn how finance works at a global scale. Then you can take those tools and go help millions of people.
It's a very seductive argument.
It is. And Cohen, she ended up choosing McKinsey because they sold her on this idea of it being a boot camp for solving problems at scale. Recruiters would talk up their work with the government of Haiti after the earthquake, or even advising the Vatican.
So they make this grueling corporate job feel like a necessary step, an apprenticeship for the real work of saving the world later on.
Precisely. And this whole narrative reinforces the MarketWorld belief that business training is a cure-all. Cohen really absorbed this idea that you had to go work for the people who controlled the money to learn how to help the people the money had left behind.
But then she gets inside, and she starts to see the cracks in that story.
Big time. She realized that, okay, business thinking is great for cutting costs or making a supply chain more efficient, but to elevate it to this universal key for solving all of society's problems, treating market analysis as the answer to poverty or climate change, she saw that was deeply questionable.
And this is where we get to that really fascinating insight about the consulting world, about the famous McKinsey methodology.
Yes. This is so important, that step-by-step, logical problem-solving framework they're famous for. She realized it was often used more for communicating an answer than for actually finding it.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, the team would often figure out the answer pretty quickly, using common sense or intuition or just based on internal company politics. The real work wasn't finding the solution. The real work was then going back and backfilling it into the template.
So they were reverse engineering the process to make the predetermined answer look like it was the logical output of this brilliant proprietary method.
Exactly. The performance of the methodology was more important than the actual discovery of truth. It's about selling the answer with a veneer of unimpeachable logic.
And when that kind of thinking, that ideology, becomes dominant, it creates a huge problem, especially when government itself starts to rely on it.
That's the danger. When even a liberal government like the Obama administration brings in consultants to, as the economist put it, sort out Uncle Sam, you have a situation where the public good is being defined by the very people who are, frankly, implicated in creating the public's problems.
It's the ultimate contradiction.
It is. I mean, these are the people who specialize in corporate optimization. And what does that usually mean in practice? It means mass layoffs, offshoring jobs, fighting unions, and keeping wages stagnant.
All the things that hollowed out the middle class.
Right. And as Cohen observed, the attitude among her peers became, yeah, we caused these problems, but hey, we're really good at solving problems, so this inequality thing is just the new problem we're going to solve.
The one that we created.
The one that we created. And that right there is the core of the elite charade. MarketWorld wants to change the world, but only in ways that don't disrupt the underlying system that made them winners. They hold on to the arrangements that let them monopolize progress, and they offer what Giridharadas calls symbolic scraps to the forsaken.
Yeah, and the tragic part is, many of the people who need those scraps wouldn't need them if we just had the systemic reforms that MarketWorld actively avoids.
Like higher taxes on the wealthy, stronger unions, better regulation, the very things their day jobs are often designed to fight against.
This dedication to preserving the system leads directly to the great illusion of MarketWorld, doesn't it? The belief in the win-win.
Yes, the doctrine of harmony. This is the almost religious faith, that the interests of the winners and the losers, the rich and the poor, are fundamentally aligned.
It's a huge philosophical shift from Adam Smith, who saw the common good as an accidental byproduct of self-interest.
A complete shift. Now, the entrepreneur is seen as the principal vessel for human betterment. You see this from people like Michael Porter at Harvard or John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods. They argue business is the ultimate positive sum game.
The ideal scenario is, what? Making money, doing good, feeling good, and working on cool problems all at the same time.
That's the dream, but what does that dream erase? It erases trade-offs. It erases conflict.
A win-lose.
The necessary win-lose.
Yeah.
Real systemic change almost always means someone has to give up power or money. The win-win faith is designed to make us forget that inconvenient truth.
And there's a perfect case study of this in the book, the Even app, a market solution to a very political problem.
A perfect example. So let's start with the problem Even was trying to solve. Its founders saw that income volatility was a huge issue for the working poor.
Their paychecks were just all over the place.
Exactly. But this wasn't some natural phenomenon. It was the result of deliberate policy choices, of technology, of corporate practices like dynamic scheduling that made hours unpredictable. It's what the political scientist Jacob Hacker called the Great Risk Shift.
The Great Risk Shift. What does that mean?
Hacker's argument was that over decades, corporations and government policies had systematically shifted economic risk away from themselves and onto the shoulders of individual workers.
So instead of the company bearing the risk of a slow week, the worker does, through fewer hours and a smaller paycheck.
Precisely. And that means their income can swing wildly from week to week, making it impossible to budget, pay bills on time, or plan for anything. It's a life on a financial roller coaster.
Okay, so that's the problem. What was MarketWorld's solution?
The Even app. It's a private, for-profit safety net. For a fee, about $260 a year, it helps you smooth out your income.
How does it do that?
In good weeks, when you make more, it automatically squirrels some of it away. In bad weeks, when your paycheck is short, it gives you an advance from your own savings or a small loan. It stabilizes your cash flow.
And you can see how for someone in that situation, that would feel like a lifesaver.
It absolutely would. The book tells the story of a user named Heather Jacobs, a single mom working at a massage chain. Her biweekly pay could be $700 one period and $90 the next. She was drowning in debt and stress, just trying to keep her head above water.
But this is where the critique comes in, right? Because the Even app wasn't really designed to solve her underlying problem.
No. It was designed to manage her precarity for a profit. Jacob Hacker, the very academic whose work inspired the founders, called Even a personal solution to a public problem.
It's a business model that bets on the problem never going away.
It's a lucrative bet that there will always be a permanent underclass trapped in this new economy whose lives can be made slightly more manageable for a fee. It completely ignores the political solutions.
Things like a higher minimum wage, or laws requiring employers to give guaranteed hours.
Or mandated sick leave, or strengthening unions so workers could bargain for stability. All of these are systemic political fixes that would prevent the problem in the first place.
And the ultimate irony is, what? If those political problems were actually solved.
The win-win business model of the Even app would probably disappear. It wouldn't be necessary anymore.
So these win-win solutions are a distraction. They treat the symptoms, but they keep us from performing what the author calls the major surgery on the system itself.
They're a very effective distraction. And this kind of cognitive dissonance, this ability to see a huge problem but only offer a market-friendly patch, it gets even more pronounced when you look at the tech elites.
The rebel kings.
Your rebel kings. They are the new Carnegies and Rockefellers. They're amassing fortunes on a scale that is widening inequality to unsustainable levels, but they cling to this self-image of being rebels, of being underdogs fighting the establishment.
You see this at places like the Summit at Sea conference, this exclusive gathering for the elite.
Right. Where a venture capitalist like Shervin Pishevar, an early investor in Uber and Airbnb, talks about fighting for truth and being in uncomfortable places. He frames his defiance of regulators and unions not as an exercise of raw corporate power, but as some kind of noble crusade.
It's a way of masking power. The book calls it disguising advocacy as prophecy.
That's the key move. They frame their own self-interested goals as these inevitable predictions about the future.
Like a social media CEO who wants more video ads, so he changes the algorithm to favor video and then predicts that video will be the future of the internet.
Exactly. They are actively engineering the future they want, and then they present it as something that's just happening naturally, which shuts down any debate about whether that future is actually good for society.
And this denial of power isn't just talk. It gets written into their legal strategies, which has huge consequences for accountability.
Oh, for sure. Let's look at Airbnb and Uber, two classic MarketWorld companies.
So Airbnb was facing a lot of heat over discrimination with the whole hashtag Airbnb while black hashtag.
Right. And publicly, they put out this great report about how they were going to fight discrimination on their platform. But when they actually got sued for it,
They changed their tune.
completely, they argued in court that they were just a platform, like a newspaper publisher, and they couldn't possibly be held liable for what their users did. It was a total abdication of responsibility.
So they wield all this power to shape the global travel market. But when something goes wrong, they claim they're powerless.
It's a classic case, and you see the exact same thing with Uber and Lyft and their drivers.
They insist the drivers are not employees, but independent entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs, right. All to avoid paying minimum wage, providing benefits, and being subject to labor laws. They claim they're just a tech company connecting a driver and a writer.
But a judge in California really took that argument apart.
He demolished it. Judge Chen basically laughed at the idea that these drivers were entrepreneurs. He compared Uber's system of control, the constant monitoring, the algorithmic pricing, the threat of being deactivated for tiny infractions, to the Panopticon.
The prison design.
The Panopticon prison, designed by Jeremy Bentham. It's a structure where a single guard can see every prisoner, but the prisoners can't tell if they're being watched at any given moment.
So they just assume they're always being watched.
And they regulate their own behavior. They internalize the discipline. Judge Chen's point was that Uber's algorithm works the same way. The drivers are under constant surveillance and control by this invisible boss, the algorithm, so they internalize the company's rules.
That is a powerful analogy. He's saying that even without a human boss standing over them, the system itself is a structure of immense power.
Immense pervasive power. And when the most powerful new companies of our time are built on this foundation of denying their own power, it promotes a vision of change that, at the end of the day, only changes the world enough to make themselves richer.
It leaves all the deep structural problems untouched.
Untouched. And this whole culture of self-enrichment and denial brings us to the ultimate moral contradiction at the heart of MarketWorld, which is philanthrocapitalism.
Where giving money away becomes a shield for how you made it.
The perfect shield. And this goes way back. It's rooted in what the book calls the Carnegie Pact. Andrew Carnegie, in his Gospel of Wealth, basically argued that massive inequality was just the price of progress.
He saw the super rich as society's best administrators of wealth.
Right. The transitory guardians of progress's fruits, as he put it.
Yeah.
And he created this unstated immunity deal that's lasted for over a century.
And that deal is?
Generosity buys you silence. If you give away enough money, no one gets to ask hard questions about how you made that money in the first place. The public is supposed to be grateful, not skeptical.
Even back then, people saw the problem with that. Teddy Roosevelt said no amount of charity can make up for misconduct in acquiring a fortune.
He did. But the pact has held. And in the modern era, there is no more glaring, horrifying example of this contradiction than the Sackler family,
The owners of Purdue Pharma.
who became some of the most celebrated philanthropists in the world. Their name was on wings of museums, on university buildings, everywhere.
While their company was lighting the fuse of the opioid epidemic.
Not just lighting it, but pouring gasoline on it. Purdue aggressively and deceptively marketed OxyContin as being less addictive than other painkillers. They knew it wasn't true. A U.S. attorney later confirmed the company knew its claims were false.
And they actively fought anyone who tried to stop them.
They fought regulators in places like West Virginia who saw the death toll rising and tried to curb prescriptions. They prioritized profit over human lives knowingly.
And all this information was out there. It wasn't some deep secret. And yet, MarketWorld just kept celebrating them as philanthropists.
Philanthropists became their primary identity. It was the perfect moral laundry for billions of dollars earned from human suffering.
This level of hypocrisy is so extreme, it's what led someone like Darren Walker, the head of the Ford Foundation, to try to break that Carnegie Pact.
Walker's story is incredible. He came from real poverty, and he says his old job as a busboy taught him more about leadership than many of his elite roles. And he insists on confronting this tension head-on.
He calls out the system that, in his words, perpetuates vast differences in privilege and then tasks the privilege with improving the system.
He says that when he talks to other elites, they'll say, why can't everyone just be like Darren? And he has to stop them and say, they can't, because of what we have done to make it harder for people like me to have my story.
So how do the elites deal with this contradiction? How do they live with it?
Walker says it's through compartmentalization, intense compartmentalization. They spend their day as a hedge fund manager or a private equity titan, working within systems of extraction and inequality.
And then in their spare time?
In my spare time, Walker says, mimicking them, I'm on the board of a school in Harlem. I'm mentoring 3 black boys in Bed-Stuy.
So these personal acts of goodness allow them to feel like they're part of the solution.
Right. But Walker's point is that it allows them to park the part of your brain and your morality that would make you demand something else of yourself and of the system. They swap real systemic change for these personal, charitable acts, and it keeps their privilege completely intact.
And this isn't just an outsider's critique. People inside that world admit it.
They do. The book features Lori Tisch, an heiress to the Lowe's fortune, who is devastatingly honest about this.
She talks about her own guilt.
She says she's racked by it. Guilt over inherited tobacco money, guilt over using the same tax loopholes that starve public services. But then she says she's not willing to be the only fool to give up those advantages.
That is a stunning admission.
It is. And her conclusion, from being inside that world her whole life, is simple. Rich people, she says, will maybe give more money away, but they don't want to radically change it because the status quo is what works for them.
That unwillingness to engage in real radical change is why MarketWorld has shifted so much of its energy toward private governance, isn't it?
It's the logical conclusion. If you're not going to change the system through politics, you have to create your own parallel system.
And this retreat from government has been going on for decades. Since Reagan and Thatcher, the dominant message has been that government is the problem, not the solution.
That created a culture where a whole generation of ambitious, idealistic young people were taught to see change happening through investment committees and startups, not through political office or community organizing.
And the ultimate expression of this private governance model was probably the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI.
Oh, without a doubt. CGI perfected this model. It shifted the entire focus from public service and democratic action to these partnerships and commitments between corporations, NGOs, and philanthropists.
And it claimed to have this massive global impact.
Massive. They announced these huge numbers, 3,600 commitments, improving 435 million lives. But here's the catch. It was all voluntary, all private, and accountable to absolutely no one except the donors themselves. There was no public oversight.
And when Bill Clinton stands up and says this approach is all that works in the modern world, he's sending a very clear message.
A very corrosive message. He's saying that democracy is obsolete, that private donor-led action is the only real path forward. It's a declaration that further erodes public faith in our shared institutions.
This brings us to the globalist critique from the economist Donny Roderick. He argues that this focus on solving global problems can be a form of moral cover for elites.
It's a brilliant point. When the elite class is focused on Rwandan coffee plantations or global climate models, they can conveniently ignore their responsibilities at home.
They can ignore the pain in their own backyards.
The pain of what Giridharadas calls the unexotic underclass. The people in West Virginia or Mississippi whose communities have been destroyed by the very economic policies and corporate strategies that MarketWorld champions.
And Roderick says this kind of private global governance is basically politics without accountability.
That's the heart of it. The people at CGI aren't accountable to a demos, to a community of citizens who can vote them out. They're accountable to a bunch of other global citizens like you. If they mess up, there's no feedback loop, no democratic mechanism to correct course.
And this whole system is propped up intellectually by what the book calls the thought leader trap.
Yes. The entire ecosystem of ideas, the TED Talks, the Aspen Institute, the paid speaking circuit, it rewards thinkers for being positive, for being unthreatening, and for being completely silent about larger systems of power.
It's a huge subsidy for ideas that favors personal tips over political critique.
It is. It pushes thinkers to personalize the political, to zoom in on the individual rather than zooming out to see the system. The classic example is Amy Cuddy's power poses research.
Right, the idea that standing in a certain way can make you feel more powerful.
The research was about powerlessness, but in her incredibly popular TED Talk, she focused only on the micro solution. Change your body language. She completely pulled the punch on discussing the systemic causes of that powerlessness, like sexism and inequality.
And she was rewarded for it. It's an easy, actionable tip that doesn't require anyone to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. When a policy expert calls for something radical, like a national school funding pool to fix inequality, a clear win-lose proposal, a thought leader will pop up with an intellectual counteroffer.
Like using big data to identify and reward star teachers.
A solution that doesn't threaten property tax-based funding or require the wealthy to pay more. It's always the path of least resistance.
And this avoidance of conflict was a reality that even the founder of the B Corp movement, Andrew Kassoy, eventually had to face.
Yeah, his story is really telling. B-Lab's whole mantra was, we stand for something, not against anything. It was an ethic of pure positivity, an opt-in system to encourage companies to do better.
But he realized that that wasn't enough.
He had this painful realization that making good easier wasn't going to solve problems like corporate greed or climate change. To do that, you have to make bad harder.
And making bad harder requires political conflict. It requires a win-lose fight.
The very thing MarketWorld is designed to avoid. He admitted that he just didn't have the stomach or the skills for that kind of activism. His whole model was built on market consensus, not political defiance.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? The entire impulse to change the world gets channeled into these comfortable, consensus-driven methods that ultimately protect the status quo.
And that leads us to where we are now, a hollowed-out middle class and this global age of anger, a populist backlash against a system that feels fundamentally rigged.
So to wrap this all up, there's a final challenge from the political philosopher Chiara Cordelli that just cuts right through the whole MarketWorld narrative.
It's a powerful rebuke. She argues that when these elites engage in philanthropy, they're not just adding some extra good to the world, they are simultaneously performing an act of acceptance.
Acceptance of an unjust system.
An unjust system that they benefit from enormously. So her conclusion is that these elites are not our saviors who deserve our praise. They are debtors.
Debtors.
They are debtors who owe a debt to society for what has been, in her words, unfairly deprived of by your common institutions. They owe us systemic change, not charity.
And she makes this crucial distinction between charity and democracy.
It's so important. Charity creates a relationship of inequality, the giver and the taker, the helper and the helpless. But democracy allows us to help each other in a context of equality, as fellow citizens with agency and a shared voice.
It's about collective action, not benevolent handouts.
And the excuse that politics is too hard or too vast for these elites just doesn't hold water. The very system that made them rich, with its low taxes and deregulation, was built through intense, effective political action on their part. They just don't want to engage in the political action that would reverse it.
So that leaves us with a final thought, a provocation for you, the listener. If real systemic change requires conflict and sacrifice, if it means targeting the very sources of elite power and wealth, can we really expect the elites to lead that charge?
We've seen from people like Lori Tisch that many of them would rather live with the guilt than actually give up their advantages. She even suggested that the only thing that might force them to accept a fairer system was, and I'm quoting, revolution, maybe? So do we wait for that? Do we wait for some external shock to the system? Or does the answer lie in reclaiming that slow, messy, democratic process ourselves? Cordelli's argument is that it's our job to make those public institutions work again and to demand real accountability from those who have tried to commandeer the role of government for their own private win-win solutions. The charade only ends when we stop accepting it.